Headquarters. Here's Fred Childers with This Week in Louisiana Politics.
Welcome, I'm Shannon Heck. Thanks for joining us for This Week in Louisiana Politics on your local election headquarters. Louisiana is launching the second phase of the high-speed internet rollout for all reaches of the state. The governor touted the $1.3 billion in federal money that will help rural areas get connected to the modern age. Louisiana has one of the biggest allocations, but there are some challenges that the state is looking to deal with. Louisiana is a leader in getting full approval to roll out the second phase and on getting fiber optic lines into the ground at a fast pace.
This is a time under which Louisiana was ahead of its game, under which we had our political leaders seeing how important it was.
The governor and Surgeon General talked about how having reliable internet is critical for health outcomes, education, and supporting law enforcement. In the first phase, there were several occasions where the crews laying the lines struck sewage and gas lines. The governor says it reveals a greater issue of the state's utilities not being properly mapped out.
This gives us an opportunity to figure out a way where we know what exactly is in the ground.
Some homes and businesses are so remote that it would cost companies a lot to serve them. So Connect Louisiana is looking for other ways to get contractors to pick up those projects.
We are technology neutral as a state, so we'll accommodate other kinds of technologies, whether it's low Earth orbit satellites or whether it's fixed wireless, to take care of those folks that we think is not going to attract the kinds of bids that we want for those locations.
The funding for this project is from the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act that passed in 2021. And lawmakers are beginning a grant process for regions of the state to build more juvenile correctional facilities. The legislature allocated $150 million to put towards these new facilities. And once the state pays for the facility, it's up to the locals to figure out how to pay to operate it. The hope is with more facilities, the state won't have to pay to house juvenile inmates in other states, and they can be held in facilities closer to home.
We thought maybe the better way, instead of it being a capital outlay process, that we do it strategically, that we weigh and measure and place the facilities across the state where there's need, where there's population, where there's workforce, rather than it becoming some political, maneuver.
The application process for the different regions will open on September 1st and close at the end of the month. And a committee along with the Commissioner of Administration's office will review them based on the high priority areas for the new facilities. The Board of Elementary and Secondary Education approved new policies that will impact teachers this year. Among the changes includes giving teachers more power to remove troublesome students from the classroom, more freedom in their lesson planning, and reducing the number of annual trainings that teachers have to do if they have already proven they know the material. A total of 18 recommendations were born out of the Department of Education's Let Teachers Teach initiative. In Vermilion Parish, a school board member is proposing the Bill of Rights be displayed in every classroom. Roderica Taylor finds out what are the next steps to get this implemented and the benefits they're aiming to achieve.
Greg Moe, a member of the school board, says that having the Bill of Rights displayed in classrooms is a way for students to learn about how the nation began.
We want all our children to learn the beginnings of our nation. I want them to fully understand all of that. I thought we had that already, but we really didn't. And it'll prompt questions. That's hopefully what it's going to do. It's going to prompt them to ask questions about what their rights are.
Sit there and just to be decoration, it's a problem.
Cody Wise, who is a senior at Kaplan High and also the president of the student body, shares how he was at the school board meeting. He states his opposition.
I don't think that there's as much of an educational value in putting the Bill of Rights in a second grade or a kindergarten classroom as much as it would have in a high school classroom or a middle school classroom. And I think that any legislative body that deals with education, specifically the school board, they need to focus on the educational value of something.
He suggests it is placed in classrooms built around American history and civics.
Those classes have the time, and it's in the curriculum to discuss the Bill of Rights. There's no educational value in putting it in a class just to have it there. It needs to have a discussion, it needs to be explained, and it needs to be honored.
Mo says nothing is final yet, even though the idea was approved unanimously.
All that did really was give us the okay to go continue further and come up with a true policy that's going to have to be approved by the entire board.
In Vermilion Parish, Roderica Taylor, KLFY News 10.
Do you have a dead tree in your yard from the dry summer last year? Well, it could be infested with beetles, making it more likely to fall down. Now, lawmakers are looking for an emergency declaration to get people funds to remove dangerous trees. After the drought of 2023, more than 12 million trees across the state are dead. Those dry conditions make the perfect home for an insect that can make them fall down, the Ips beetle.
Beetles found a food source in weakened trees, and they've taken advantage of that.
Buck Vanderstein with the Louisiana Forestry Association says there is not an epidemic of these insects. As for the trees, it's not a question of if they'll fall, but when. But in urban communities, it is more of a problem.
To a homeowner, that tree is right next to their property, that is the most important tree in 1 billion trees in Louisiana.
A legislative committee is searching for ways to get people money to remove dead trees through an emergency declaration from the governor to get federal aid.
A single tree can be $2,500 or $3,000 to remove, and most folks can't afford that.
State Representative Mike Johnson says that he has constituents who worry about trees falling on their homes. It's the peak of hurricane season, so a windstorm could cause millions of the dry and beetle-ridden trees to topple over.
We were without electricity about 3 weeks in central Louisiana several years ago. They're saying it could be double that now if a storm were to come through, because they're 10 times as many dead trees.
The committee is working to get federal dollars on the table, and members are also working with insurance companies, DOTD, and utilities to deal with dead trees across the state. For your local election headquarters, I'm Shannon Hecht. The Louisiana Department of Child and Family Services is out $125,000 in federal benefits due to skimming. A spokesperson says this is not the result of a data breach, but a theft of card information, with skimmers stealing benefits from EBT cards. DCFS says it plans to implement new security features that give clients the ability to stop out-of-state spending, lock online card activity, and set spending limits. The department's fraud unit is also monitoring transactions to detect fraudulent activity and is urging clients to change their PIN numbers. AT&T workers have been striking across the state over contract negotiations. We caught up with a number of the people on the picket line about what their demands are.
Nobody wants to be on strike. We want to be out there serving our customers and actually be at work.
Over 17,000 workers in 9 states across the Southeast, including Louisiana, began striking last Friday due to contract negotiations this summer.
This strike is solely because they have nobody at the table. They can't even answer questions to their own proposals.
Here in Baton Rouge, about 300 workers from 6 locations are holding signs and protesting. Sherwood Forest is one of them.
Nobody's making money. Everybody's out here. I just spent my own money and bought everybody lunch. We're getting big support from the public.
Dwayne Henderson, an AT&T employee of 25 years and the Communications Workers of America's Local 3403 president, says AT&T not having a representative at the bargaining table makes it hard for employees to negotiate better wages and health care.
It's upsetting. We're the reason why this company's so successful. We are the boots on the ground. We're the ones interacting with the customers on a daily basis.
In a statement released by AT&T, the company says they hope to reach an agreement with CWA District 3, and they have measures in place to provide their customers with adequate service during the strike.
It's all about the benefits, wages, and any work rules regarding our jobs.
AT&T also said in a letter to the union these claims are false and the union hasn't been flexible. The tech giant also requested a federal mediation with the union.
Please explain to me how the guys that show up to work every day, go interact with your customers, are considered second class.
Sydney Simone, Fox 44 News.
After the break, more about a legislation pushing for AM radio to be in all cars as the Hurricane Katrina anniversary looms. And meet the 3 major candidates running for the 6th Congressional District.
This is your local election headquarters.
Ahead of the anniversary of Hurricane Katrina, which is among the 5 deadliest hurricanes to ever strike the United States, a group of state and local officials are rallying around a bill that would require all new passenger vehicles to have AM radio. Jordan Lippincott reports.
In a letter addressed to House Speaker Mike Johnson and House Majority Leader Steve Scalise, a coalition of more than 20 Louisiana public safety experts asked that they schedule the bipartisan AM Radio for Every Vehicle Act for a vote and push for its enactment before the end of the year. The group says that AM radio especially proved its effectiveness during Hurricane Katrina when cell and internet services had failed.
During that time, WWL was a lifeline for the community, getting out the information to those that needed it. Also was a voice for the leaders of this community to speak up and tell Washington, D.C. what we needed in New Orleans.
Benny Roussel, former Plaquemines Parish president who served during Hurricane Katrina, is one of the people who signed the letter in support of the AM Radio for Every Vehicle Act.
Immediately after Katrina, everything was silent. Dead, including the birds. There was no sound anywhere, but AM radio helped put us back in touch with people and require the necessary communications to move forward.
The bill's supporters also say another reason why AM radio is critical during a weather event is because of its geographic reach. Many drivers rely on it while evacuating.
If we go into another devastation situation where all the cell towers go down and the communications are out and we don't have AM radio, it'd be like driving a vehicle at midnight without headlights.
Barron believes the loss of AM radio in new vehicles is a public safety issue and urges his elected officials to pass the bill.
If you're truly concerned about the safety of individuals in times of natural disasters, AM radio is essential.
Jordan Lippincott, WGNO News.
The Louisiana Supreme Court ruled that 2 candidates vying for the newly drawn majority-minority district seat will not be placed on the ballots this upcoming election. The Supreme Court ruled that Marcus Hunter is ineligible to run in the 2nd Supreme Court district seat, and the court also declined to hear a case that would have allowed Leslie Chambers back on the ballot. This decision leaves John Michael Guidry unopposed in the race. Hunter was challenged after questions were raised on prior tax filings, while Chambers was challenged based on a lack of tax filings for the past 5 years and a residency question. And this fall, thousands of Louisianians will get the chance to vote for a new representative in Congress. In the newly formed majority-minority district that stretches from Baton Rouge to Lafayette to Shreveport, 3 major candidates are looking to Washington to make some changes. I sat down with those 3 candidates to learn more of why they are running. Take a look. In a congressional district still working its way through the court system, Republican Elbert Guillory is making another attempt at federal office. The former state senator is hitching his campaign on major GOP priorities such as securing the southern border.
The drugs and thugs coming in, the diseases coming in, we need to vet everyone who comes in. You just can't let people break into your house through the side door.
The Opelousas attorney says that he wants to force 10% of foreign aid to be sent back to Louisiana, despite not being sure how to make that happen.
Someone has to stand up for the people of America, the people of Louisiana, the people of the 6th District. And I'm going to make all kind of noise and embarrass everybody until I get more money.
Across the aisle, State Senator Cleo Fields hopes to finish what he started in the 1990s when he was redistricted out of his congressional seat. Having a district that stretches across the state isn't new for Fields, and he says he has learned a lot about what the people of the 6th District need from Washington.
Although we've passed an infrastructure bill, there are a lot of these local towns and municipalities throughout the district that can't access it. And so I gotta, my congressional office, if elected, will be working with these local towns and municipalities.
Raising the minimum wage and bolstering funding for education remain his top priority. And some of his opponents have taken issue with Fields having a history of working with Republicans on legislation, and some feel that the district was created for him. Fields says reaching across the aisle is how things get done.
I would hope that people would send me to Washington to get things done. not send me to Washington, and if my party is not in the majority, sit back and do nothing.
Political newcomer Quentin Anthony Anderson is marking himself as the anti-establishment candidate. He's worked in the criminal justice realm and says the people of the 6th District need a break from lifelong politicians. And he routinely is taking swipes at Fields' political history.
Their status, they're often the chairman of powerful committees, or they're in charge of getting people elected, and they get credit for getting governors and senators elected, and yet they can't fix a pothole in our street. They can't pick up the trash. Shreveport is under a Boyle advisory. Anderson stands on core Democratic beliefs of raising the minimum wage, gun control, and ending the school-to-prison pipeline. He is willing to compromise to get legislation through should he be elected. If there's a deal to get $10 an hour right now, I'm going to take that deal. That's not because I'm compromising on $15 or a living wage. It's because those families making $7.25 would really, really like $10 right now. Fields and Guillory have been endorsed by their respective political parties. Election day is November 5th. For your local election headquarters, I'm Shannon Hecht. Coming up, we wrap up the major events at the Democratic National Convention and see how Louisiana played a role.
This is your local election headquarters.
The Democratic National Convention has wrapped up, and Vice President Kamala Harris is the official candidate for president. The event had many big-name speakers, including the Obamas, Governor Tim Walz, and even some representatives for Louisiana. President Joe Biden gave one of his final major speeches of his political career as he passes the torch to Harris, and he begins to take a look at life outside of Washington.
Selecting Kamala was the very first decision I made when I became our nominee. And it was the best decision I made my whole career. We've not only gotten to know each other, we've become close friends. She's tough, she's experienced, and she has enormous integrity, enormous integrity. Her story represents the best American story. And like many of our best presidents, she was also vice president. That's a joke.
Now Harris and Walz will get back on the campaign trail alongside Donald Trump and J.D. Vance before Election Day on November 5th. And a woman from Baton Rouge spoke at the DNC in Chicago. Caitlin Joshua was one of 3 women who spoke to the crowd about reproductive rights. She has come to be known across the state after she was not able to receive care during a miscarriage in 2022. She says this was because doctors feared repercussions from the state's abortion ban. Attorney General Liz Murrill took to Twitter to hit back at Joshua's speech, saying the law clearly allows a mother to get care if she is experiencing a medical emergency. And Louisiana Democrats traveled to Chicago to cast the state's nominating vote for Vice President Kamala Harris. Public Service Commissioner Devontae Lewis was in attendance alongside the head of the Louisiana Democratic Party and a number of state legislators. Former mayor and Louisiana delegate Jennifer Verdreen called the prospect of electing the first black woman president of the United States hopeful. She stresses the importance of this year's election cycle.
All of these expensive medications will be on the line if we do not continue with this administration, so people will not have to choose between paying rent or getting their medications. Minimum wage is at stake. Also, women earning the same amount as men. All of these things that affect our daily lives are at stake. So that's why it's so important that everyone go out and vote.
Verdreen had previously served as a delegate for both of Barack Obama's terms and for Hillary Clinton's 2016 bid. Up next, we'll have a look at the week ahead on your local election headquarters.
This is your local election headquarters.
Looking ahead to the coming week, on Monday, the Louisiana Economic Development Secretary, Susan Bourgeois, will speak at the Baton Rouge Press Club. On Wednesday, Andrew Hundley from the Parole Project will be addressing the Baton Rouge Rotary Club. And on Friday, the House Appropriations Committee is meeting at the Capitol at 9 a.m. Thank you for joining us for This Week in Louisiana Politics. I'm Shannon Hecht, and I'll see you next Sunday right here on your local election headquarters.